For 11 years, the war had only moved in one direction. Every map in the Galactic Alliance command chambers told the same story. Every update, every casualty report, every desperate evacuation carried the same conclusion. The enemy was winning, not slowly, not by inches, by entire star systems. The Kareth Dominion had appeared from the dark edge of known space without warning. They did not negotiate. They did not threaten. They did not demand territory or resources. They simply advanced. World after world disappeared behind their fleets. Colonies that had taken centuries to build were reduced to silent ruins within weeks. Defensive lines that military theorists had once considered impenetrable collapsed under pressure that seemed almost impossible to understand. The Dominion fought differently than any species the Alliance had ever encountered. Their ships moved with frightening coordination. Their commanders anticipated attacks before they happened. Their logistics chains never failed. Their fleets reacted to changing battlefield conditions with a speed that made Alliance admirals question whether they were fighting living beings or some vast intelligence spread across millions of minds. Every conventional answer failed. Build larger fleets? The Dominion adapted. Create stronger weapons? The Dominion adapted. Develop new formations? The Dominion adapted. Again and again. For 11 years. By the beginning of the 12th year, nearly a third of Alliance territory was gone. More than 8 billion civilians had been displaced. Thousands of warships had been destroyed. Entire species now existed only as scattered refugee populations living aboard evacuation fleets. Hope had not vanished completely, but it had become something fragile, something spoken about quietly, something people carried inside themselves rather than discussed openly. Grand Chancellor Alaris understood this better than anyone. She stood alone in the central observation chamber of the Alliance Citadel and looked down at the holographic map floating beneath her. Red markers filled entire sectors. Each one represented a lost world. There were too many to count anymore. Behind her, the massive doors opened. No announcement was necessary. She already knew who had entered. Admiral Turin walked into the chamber carrying a data tablet. His expression told her everything before he spoke. Another defeat. Another line broken. Another system abandoned. The 9th Defensive Fleet has withdrawn, he said quietly. Alaris closed her eyes. Casualties? Turin hesitated. 37 ships. A long silence followed. And the civilians? Most escaped. Most. Not all. Never all. Alaris looked back toward the star map. For a moment she felt every one of her 900 years. Every war. Every crisis. Every promise she had made to protect the civilizations gathered under the Alliance banner. She had never felt older. What options remain? She finally asked. Turin did not answer immediately, because they both knew the truth. There were almost none. The military wanted more ships. The industrial councils wanted more time. The scientists wanted another breakthrough. Everyone wanted something, but nobody possessed the one thing the Alliance had run out of years ago. An advantage. At last, Turin handed her the tablet. There is one proposal. Alaris accepted it. The document was surprisingly short. Only a few pages. A single recommendation from Strategic Analysis Command. She read the title once, then a second time. Her expression changed. Humans? Turin nodded. The word hung in the air. Humans. The newest major civilization in Alliance space. Relative newcomers. A species with a military reputation that many considered exaggerated. Their fleets were respectable but not extraordinary. Their technology was competitive but not revolutionary. Their population was modest compared to older powers. Nothing about them suggested they could change the course of a war that had already consumed a decade. Yet strategic analysis had highlighted one particular section. A section Alaris now read carefully. Human warfare doctrine places unusual emphasis on small autonomous units operating independently behind enemy lines for extended periods. She continued reading. The deeper she went, the stranger it became. Human history contained thousands of years of conflicts where small groups had achieved strategic effects wildly disproportionate to their numbers. Sabotage. intelligence gathering, infiltration, deception, psychological warfare, methods most Alliance species viewed as secondary. Humans treated them as essential. Alaris lowered the tablet. You believe this can matter? Turin stared at the sea of red stars covering the map. I believe everything else has failed. The room fell silent. Beyond the observation windows, countless stars shone against the darkness. Entire civilizations waited for answers, for hope, for something, anything. Alaris looked once more at the proposal. Then she made a decision that future historians would later describe as the turning point of the war. Contact Earth. Turin blinked. Immediately, she returned her gaze to the map. If we are going to lose this war, then we have nothing left to risk. A pause. Then she added quietly, and if humanity truly fights the way these reports suggest. Her eyes settled on the advancing red frontier. Then perhaps the Dominion is about to discover that there are worse things than an enemy fleet. The message to Earth was transmitted 17 minutes later. 3 weeks afterward, humanity answered, and the war began to change. The delegation from Earth arrived without ceremony. No massive escort fleets accompanied them. No grand displays of military power filled the skies above the Alliance citadel. When their vessel entered orbit, many Alliance observers initially assumed it was merely an advanced diplomatic transport. It was small, practical, unremarkable, the kind of ship that attracted no attention, which, as some would later realize, was very much the point. Grand Chancellor Alaris received the delegation in the High Council chamber. Representatives from dozens of species attended. Military commanders filled entire rows of seats. Many had spent years fighting the Dominion. Many had lost worlds. Many had little patience left for optimism. The doors opened. 5 humans entered. Only 5. The room immediately became quieter. Not because the humans looked intimidating. Quite the opposite. They appeared ordinary. No ceremonial armor. No decorations. No dramatic uniforms. Just dark service attire and expressions that suggested they were here to work rather than impress anyone. At their center walked Director Maravas. She was older than most of the others. Gray streaks touched her hair. Her posture was relaxed. Her eyes were not. Those eyes moved around the chamber once, calmly taking in every face, every reaction, every detail. Then she sat. No speech, no introduction, no attempt to command attention. She simply waited. The silence became uncomfortable for several council members. Finally, Chancellor Alaris spoke. Director Voss, thank you for coming. Voss nodded. We reviewed your intelligence package. And Voss glanced toward the massive holographic map suspended above the chamber. Red Dominion territory stretched across entire sectors. She studied it for several seconds. Then she said something nobody expected. You're fighting the wrong war. The chamber erupted instantly. Several admirals began protesting at once. A council representative slammed a hand against his desk. One military commander actually laughed. 11 years of casualties. Billions displaced. Thousands of destroyed ships. And this human had entered the room and declared they were fighting the wrong war. Alaris raised a hand for silence. Eventually the room settled. Explain. Voss stood. The holographic map shifted. Dominion fleets appeared across dozens of systems. Supply routes lit up. Communication lines flashed. Command networks spread across the display like glowing veins. What do you see? She asked. The Urian admiral answered immediately. The enemy. No. Voss pointed at the network. That's not the enemy. Confusion spread through the chamber. Voss zoomed the image further. More details appeared. Communication relays, navigation hubs, data transfer points, strategic coordination centers. The fleets are not the enemy. She pointed again. The ships are not the enemy. Another point. The soldiers are not the enemy. Her finger settled on the glowing web connecting everything together. This is the enemy. Nobody spoke. Voss looked around the room. For 11 years you've been shooting at the body. She tapped the network. We're interested in the nervous system. The room became very quiet. A military analyst frowned. You believe destroying their communications wins the war? No. Voss smiled slightly. Destroying things is easy. The smile disappeared. Understanding them is hard. She changed the display. Historical battle records appeared. Thousands of engagements. Patterns emerged immediately. Every Dominion response was fast, precise, coordinated, almost impossibly coordinated. They know things too quickly, Voss said. They adapt too quickly. Another image appeared. Dominion fleet movements, supply deployments, resource reallocations, all occurring with frightening efficiency. Nobody coordinates millions of individuals this effectively through normal command structures. A pause. So either they're smarter than every species in this room combined. She pointed toward the data. Or there's a system we haven't found yet. The implication settled over the chamber. A hidden mechanism. Something deeper. Something controlling the flow of information. Alaris leaned forward. And you intend to find it? Yes. How? Voss finally revealed the proposal. A new display appeared. Not fleets. Not armies. People. Photographs. Service records. Mission histories. Hundreds of human operators. Some young. Some old. Some looked like soldiers. Others looked like teachers, engineers, or office workers. None looked extraordinary, which somehow made them more unsettling. The room stared. A general frowned. Where are the rest? Voss looked at him. The rest of what? Your military. The human director's expression never changed. You're looking at it. Several council members exchanged confused glances. That is barely 200 people. Correct. The general almost laughed. The Dominion fields millions of soldiers. Yes. You intend to fight millions with 200? Not fight. Voss replied calmly. Find. The room fell silent again. She zoomed in on one particular personnel file. A woman. Dark hair. Steady eyes. Dozens of completed operations. Almost no public record. Name, Master Sergeant Dara Cole. One person can go places a fleet cannot. Another file appeared. Then another. Then another. Each represented years of training. Years of operating unseen. Years of entering places nobody thought accessible. The Dominion has spent 11 years preparing for armies. Voss folded her hands behind her back. They have spent exactly 0 years preparing for us. For the first time, some of the military commanders stopped looking skeptical and started looking thoughtful, because they were beginning to understand. Humans had not come to build a bigger hammer. They had come looking for cracks. And history had repeatedly demonstrated that even the strongest fortress eventually falls when someone finds the right crack. Voss looked around the chamber one final time. We are not offering you a miracle. Her voice remained calm. We are offering patience. She pointed at the map. Give us access. Another point. Give us intelligence. Another. And give us time. The room remained silent. Then Grand Chancellor Alaris asked the question that would shape the future of the war. If we do that, she met Voss's eyes. What exactly happens next? For the first time during the meeting, Mara Voss smiled. It was not the smile of a diplomat, or a politician, or even a military officer. It was the smile of someone who had finally found a problem worthy of solving. We go inside. And 3 months later, the first human teams disappeared into Dominion space. 3 months after the agreement was signed, the first human teams vanished. Officially, they did not exist. There were no announcements, no ceremonies, no fleet departures broadcast across Alliance space. One day they were present. The next day they were gone. Even many Alliance commanders did not know where they had been sent. That was intentional. Director Mara Voss believed secrecy had value only if it was practiced consistently. If too many people knew a mission existed, eventually the enemy would know too. So the teams disappeared quietly. 8 people here, 6 people there, sometimes only 1. Small groups launched from civilian transports, cargo vessels, reconnaissance ships, and occasionally from locations that had never appeared on any official map. Their destinations lay deep inside Dominion territory, places the Alliance had not reached in over a decade, places many considered inaccessible. The first reports arrived 42 days later. Admiral Turin received them personally. At first glance, they seemed insignificant. A supply depot operating at 73% efficiency. A communications hub using an unusual signal protocol. A fleet movement pattern that differed slightly from established doctrine. Tiny details. Nothing dramatic. Nothing worthy of headlines. Yet as more reports arrived, a pattern began to emerge. The humans were seeing things nobody else could see. Not because they possessed superior technology. Because they were present. Actually there. Watching. Listening. Learning. For 11 years, Alliance intelligence had observed the Dominion from the outside. The humans were observing it from the inside. The difference proved enormous. Within 4 months, they had assembled a picture of Dominion operations more detailed than the Alliance had gathered during the entire previous decade. Supply routes, maintenance cycles, command habits, patrol schedules, communication delays, personnel behavior. The Dominion suddenly seemed less like an unstoppable force of nature and more like a machine. A very large machine, but still a machine. And machines had weaknesses. The breakthrough came from Team 7. They were operating near a remote logistics sector on the edge of Dominion-controlled space. Their objective had been routine surveillance. Nothing more. Then one of the operators noticed something strange. The convoy changed course. Not unusual. Convoys changed course constantly. But this one changed course before receiving updated orders. The timing was impossible. The observation was transmitted. Analysts reviewed it. Then they found another example. And another. And another. Soon dozens of similar incidents surfaced. Dominion units were reacting to information before they should have possessed it. The reports reached Voss. She studied them for several hours. Then she called an emergency intelligence meeting. The room filled quickly. Analysts, military officers, signal specialists. Everyone sensed something important was happening. Voss projected the data onto the wall. "What do you see?" One analyst answered. "Predictive coordination." Another shook his head. "Impossible." A third pointed at the timing intervals. "They're receiving information faster than physics allows." The room grew quiet, because everyone understood what that meant. There was another layer. Something hidden. Some mechanism nobody had discovered. Something connecting Dominion forces beyond normal communications. Voss folded her arms. "I agree." The analysts exchanged glances. One finally asked the question. "What exactly are we looking for?" Voss looked toward the display. The answer came slowly. "A heartbeat." Confusion spread across several faces. She continued. "Every civilization has one." The image shifted. Human communication networks appeared. Transportation systems, trade routes, information exchanges, economic flows, military coordination structures, a complex living system. The larger the organism, the more important the heartbeat. The display changed again. Now it showed the Dominion, the visible parts, the known parts, the incomplete parts. Something is holding all of this together. Her finger traced the network. "We keep looking at the arms and legs." A pause. "I want the heart." The search intensified. Human teams received new objectives. Less sabotage. Less surveillance. More investigation. They began following signals. Tracking unusual transmissions. Monitoring obscure facilities that appeared strategically unimportant but attracted disproportionate attention. Months passed. Then, on a cold world orbiting a dim red star, someone found something. The report came from Master Sergeant Dara Cole. She had spent 17 days hidden near a remote Dominion relay station. The installation appeared insignificant, small, poorly defended, far from major military operations. Yet every few hours a signal passed through it. A signal unlike any communication pattern the Alliance had ever recorded. It was ancient, regular, persistent, and it originated from somewhere deep inside Dominion territory. Cole transmitted the data. Alliance linguists examined it. Signal specialists analyzed it. Artificial intelligence systems processed it. Nothing made sense. The transmission carried no tactical information, no commands, no coordinates, no military content. Yet it traveled across the entire Dominion network. Every day, every hour, without interruption, as if it were important, as if it were essential. The mystery reached Director Voss. She listened to the signal herself. Again, and again, and again. There was something unsettling about it. Not threatening, not aggressive, just significant, like hearing a language you couldn't understand while somehow knowing it mattered. 3 days later, additional reports arrived. Other human teams had found the same signal. Different sectors, different worlds, different relay stations. Always the same transmission, always moving through the network, always treated as a priority. For the first time in years, Voss felt genuine excitement. Not because they had solved the mystery, because they had finally found its shadow. The hidden system existed, and now it was leaving footprints. She summoned her senior operators. The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. At its conclusion, she displayed a single image. A planet located farther inside Dominion territory than any Alliance operative had ever traveled. No military significance, no major fleet presence, no industrial infrastructure, just a single ancient installation, and every trace of the mysterious signal pointed toward it. The room remained silent. Everyone understood the implications. The deeper the target, the greater the risk. Eventually Voss looked toward one particular file displayed on the wall. Master Sergeant Dara Cole, 39 years old, 10 years of deep infiltration experience, 0 mission failures, an alarming tendency to volunteer for impossible assignments. Cole studied the image for several seconds, then nodded once. "I'll go." Nobody argued, because everyone already knew she would. And somewhere deep inside enemy territory, on a forgotten world hidden beneath centuries of history, something ancient was waiting. Something that had been speaking continuously for thousands of years. Something that might explain why the Dominion had never truly fought as individuals. And Dara Cole was about to find it. Master Sergeant Dara Cole entered Dominion deep space alone. No escort, no support team, no rescue plan beyond a narrow extraction window that might never arrive. The mission profile was simple. Reach the source of the signal. Document everything. Leave. Nothing more. Nothing less. The journey took 21 days. Every hour carried risk. Dominion patrols crossed her route repeatedly. Sensor sweeps passed within kilometers of her position. Twice she remained motionless for nearly 18 hours while enemy searchcraft combed the surrounding terrain. Neither time did they find her. By the time she reached the target world, she had begun to understand why Alliance intelligence had never discovered it. The planet seemed forgotten, not abandoned, forgotten. Dense forests covered enormous regions of the surface. Ancient mountain ranges surrounded vast valleys untouched by modern construction. Even the orbital infrastructure was minimal. There were no major military facilities, no fleet shipyards, no industrial centers. Nothing that suggested strategic importance. And yet the signal came from here. Cole landed nearly 80 kilometers from the source and approached on foot. Patience was survival. Speed got people killed. For 4 days she moved carefully through unfamiliar terrain. The closer she came to the target, the stranger her observations became. There were Dominion patrols, but not many. There were sensors, but they seemed designed to protect something rather than defend against attack. Most importantly, there was a sense of age. Everything felt old, very old. On the morning of the 5th day, she finally saw the installation. She stopped walking. For several seconds, she simply stared. It was enormous. Not in the way military facilities were enormous. Not functional. Not efficient. Beautiful. The structure rose from the center of a wide natural basin. Ancient stone-like materials formed sweeping curves and towering walls. Time and nature had partially reclaimed it. Plants covered sections of the exterior. Roots wound through cracks. Entire sections appeared older than recorded Dominion history. Cole immediately knew something important. This place had not been built as a military installation. It had become one later. The original purpose had been something else. Something significant. She spent the next 4 days observing from concealment, recording patrol patterns, mapping entrances, analyzing security systems. The more data she gathered, the stranger the picture became. Military equipment existed. Communication relays existed. Power systems existed. But they all appeared secondary, as though someone had attached them to a location that already mattered. The building itself was the important thing. Finally, on the 9th day, she entered. The interior changed everything. The architecture was unlike anything the Alliance had ever documented. Large halls stretched beneath vaulted ceilings. Ancient symbols covered walls and pillars. Not written language. Not exactly. Something older. Patterns repeated throughout the structure. Shapes within shapes. Sequences that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple communication. Cole photographed everything. Every corridor. Every chamber. Every symbol. Hours passed. Then she found the center. The room was circular. Massive. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above. And in the exact center stood a single structure. A cylinder approximately 2 meters tall. Ancient. Silent. Active. The signal originated from it. Cole immediately began recording. Measurements. Energy readings. Material scans. Signal analysis. Every piece of information her equipment could collect. 3 hours passed. Then something moved. Her instincts reacted before conscious thought. She slipped behind a support pillar moments before a Dominion soldier entered the chamber. The soldier walked slowly toward the central structure. Cole remained perfectly still. The soldier stopped in front of the cylinder. And then something unexpected happened. The Dominion soldier lowered its head. Not mechanically, not procedurally, respectfully. The gesture reminded Cole of people visiting memorials, or graves, or sacred places. Then the soldier made a sound, a soft vocalization, not communication, not a military report, something emotional, something personal. Cole listened carefully. The sound echoed through the enormous chamber. For a moment the soldier simply stood there. Then it turned and left. The room became silent again. Cole remained hidden for another 20 minutes. Her pulse had slowed, but her thoughts had not. Something fundamental had just happened. This was not a command center, not a military headquarters, not a strategic facility. It was something else entirely, something the Dominion cared about. The realization followed her through the rest of the mission. 48 hours later, she transmitted her findings. The data reached Alliance intelligence. Then Director Voss. Then the Alliance's top xenolinguists. Among them was Dr. Elian Orvek, a specialist in alien cognition. He reviewed the recordings continuously for 16 hours. When he finally contacted Voss, his voice sounded different, almost shaken. "We know what it is." Voss immediately sat upright. "Tell me." A long silence followed. Then Orvek spoke. "The signal isn't communication." "What is it?" Another pause. Finally, "It's memory." The room became still. Orvek continued. "The structure predates modern Dominion civilization by thousands of years." Data scrolled across Voss's screen. Translation models, behavioral analysis, historical projections, all pointing toward the same conclusion. "The signal isn't coordinating fleets," Orvek said quietly. "It isn't transmitting orders." "Then what is it doing?" "It reminds them who they are." The words hung in the air. Voss frowned. "Explain." Orvek pulled up a new model. A civilization. Generations stretching across millennia. A continuous cultural thread connecting billions of individuals. The signal is broadcasting a shared ancestral memory. His voice softened. Every Dominion citizen receives it. Images appeared. Ancient migrations, early settlements, founding myths, collective identity. The closest human concept would be. He searched for the words. Home. Voss stared at the data. It tells them where they came from. Yes. And they've been hearing it their entire lives. Yes. The implications arrived all at once. For 11 years, the Alliance had assumed the Dominion's unity came from superior command systems, superior discipline, superior organization. They had been wrong. The unity came from something deeper. Identity. Belonging. A constant reminder that every individual was part of something ancient and larger than themselves. The signal wasn't controlling them. It was connecting them. Voss sat silently. Eventually she asked the only question that mattered. If it stopped. Orvek didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. We don't know. What do you mean? We don't know because it has never stopped. The room fell silent. Thousands of years. Continuous transmission. Continuous connection. No interruption. Ever. Hours later another message arrived from Dara Cole. Short. Direct. Professional. Source documented. Mission complete. Then a final note. The structure contains a manual shutdown mechanism. A pause. Then, I can reach it. Your decision. Voss read the message twice. Then a third time. She thought about the Dominion soldier standing quietly before the structure. She thought about the sound it had made. She thought about what it meant to erase the oldest surviving piece of an entire civilization. Finally, she opened a secure channel. Her reply contained only 4 words. Do not touch it. A second later she added, come home. Far away, deep inside enemy territory. Dara Cole read the message. Then she smiled, because she had hoped that would be the answer. And without realizing it, humanity had just made a choice that would shape the future of the war, and the future of the Dominion itself. Dara Cole began her journey home the same day she received Voss's message. The mission was complete. The truth had been found. Now came the dangerous part. Leaving. Entering enemy territory was difficult. Leaving it after discovering something important was often worse. Unknown to Cole, Dominion security forces had already detected traces of her presence. Not enough to identify her. Not enough to locate her. But enough to know something was wrong. For days, reports had been accumulating. A thermal anomaly that lasted only seconds. Footprints that appeared and disappeared. Sensors registering movement where no authorized personnel existed. Individually, the incidents meant nothing. Together, they suggested an intruder. The problem was that nobody could find one. Patrols increased. Search teams expanded. Entire sections of territory were scanned repeatedly. Still nothing. The intruder remained invisible. And that invisibility began to have an effect. Dominion soldiers started reporting unusual behavior. Increased alertness. Interrupted rest cycles. Elevated stress responses. A growing awareness that something was nearby. Something watching. Something intelligent. Something they could not see. For the first time in living memory, parts of the Dominion military experienced uncertainty. And uncertainty spread faster than fear. While search teams hunted shadows, another operation was already moving into its final stage. Across 12 separate sectors, human infiltration teams prepared for activation. The planning had taken nearly a year. Every movement, every contingency, every timing sequence. Director Mara Voss personally reviewed the final operation order. Then she signed it. Operation window began at 0400 Alliance Standard Time. First, nothing appeared to happen. No fleets moved. No attacks were launched. No explosions lit the darkness. That was intentional. The first phase occurred entirely inside Dominion communication networks. 12 human teams activated devices they had spent months placing. Tiny systems, easy to overlook, difficult to detect, individually insignificant, collectively devastating. Within minutes, false information began entering the Dominion command structure. Small inaccuracies, nothing dramatic, Fleet positions shifted slightly. Supply reports became subtly incorrect. Sensor readings changed by fractions. Tiny distortions entered the system. Then they multiplied. Commanders received information that was almost correct. Almost, which made it far more dangerous than obvious deception. For the next 48 hours, Dominion forces operated inside a reality that no longer existed. Some fleets moved toward threats that weren't there. Others ignored dangers that were. Reserves deployed to the wrong sectors. Supply shipments followed incorrect routes. Defensive formations opened gaps without realizing it. At first nobody understood what was happening. Then confusion spread. Then mistakes multiplied. Then the Alliance struck. For 11 years the Alliance had fought defensively. Now, for the first time, they attacked according to a plan built around Dominion weakness instead of Dominion strength. Entire fleets surged through openings that should never have existed. Strategic targets fell. Supply hubs were destroyed. Communication centers disappeared. The Dominion reacted immediately. But reaction depended on information. And information was exactly what had been compromised. The enemy that had once seemed perfectly coordinated suddenly appeared uncertain. Slow. Disjointed. Not weak. Never weak. But vulnerable. Admiral Turin watched the operation unfold from Alliance Command. The battle map changed constantly. For the first time in more than a decade, red Dominion markers began disappearing faster than Alliance markers. Entire sectors shifted. Defensive lines stabilized. Long-abandoned strategies suddenly became viable. The impossible was happening. The Dominion was making mistakes. Real mistakes. The kind made by ordinary civilizations. Not invincible ones. At hour 19, a Dominion commander-class vessel entered a trap after acting on corrupted fleet intelligence. It never escaped. At hour 27, a major supply corridor collapsed. At hour 31, 3 Dominion attack groups converged on a location where Alliance forces no longer existed. At hour 38, another commander-class vessel was destroyed. Then another, and another. Each loss sent shockwaves through Dominion command structures. The enemy adapted quickly, faster than anyone else could have managed. But adaptation required understanding. And they still didn't understand what was happening, because they were searching for weapons. What they were actually fighting was people. Invisible people. People already inside their systems. People who had spent months preparing for exactly this moment. As the operation entered its final hours, reports continued arriving from human teams. Mission complete. Objective achieved. Exfiltration underway. One after another. No celebrations. No dramatic messages. Just professionals reporting results. Director Voss read every report personally. Then she noticed something unusual. No casualty notifications. She checked again. Still none. 126 operatives had entered the operation. 126 operatives were coming home. Even Voss found that surprising. The final hour arrived. The false signals ceased. The hidden devices shut down. The Dominion communication network began correcting itself. Slowly, painfully, reality returned. But the damage had already been done. 48 hours. Only 48 hours. Yet the consequences would reshape the war. When the final numbers arrived 3 days later, Alliance leadership stared at them in silence. The results were beyond expectation. Over 200 Dominion warships destroyed. Multiple commander-class vessels eliminated. Dozens of strategic facilities damaged or captured. Several lost sectors transformed from occupied territory into contested space. Most importantly of all, the Dominion advance had stopped. Not permanently, not completely, but stopped. For the first time in 11 years, the enemy was no longer moving forward. Grand Chancellor Alaris looked at the report for a long time. Then she asked the question everyone wanted answered. What frightened them? The intelligence room became quiet, because something unusual had appeared in intercepted Dominion communications. A phrase, repeated again and again. Different sectors, different commanders, different units, always carrying the same meaning. The translation algorithms struggled with it at first. Eventually, they found the closest approximation. The phrase appeared on the screen. The unseen hunters. Another report arrived minutes later. Then another. More intercepted communications. More references. The phrase was spreading. Not through military channels. Through ordinary personnel. Soldiers. Technicians. Pilots. People who had never met a human. People who had never seen one. Yet they were talking about them. Because for 48 hours something impossible had happened. An enemy had walked through their defenses. Touched everything. Changed everything. And disappeared. The Dominion had spent centuries becoming the thing everyone feared. Now, for the first time, they had discovered what it felt like to be afraid. And deep within Alliance space, Director Maravos looked at the reports and understood something important. The operation had not merely damaged the enemy. It had changed how the enemy thought. The Dominion now knew they could be reached. They could be infiltrated. They could be surprised. Most importantly, they could be beaten. And once an enemy learns that, they are never quite the same again. Dara Cole had been inside Vreth territory for 19 days. The world beneath her boots was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was warm, silent, alive. A strange fibrous organism covered almost the entire surface of the planet, spreading in layered sheets that swallowed sound and softened light. Walking through it felt like moving through the interior of some vast sleeping creature. Cole liked it. That alone irritated her. People were not supposed to enjoy enemy territory. Yet after nearly 3 weeks alone, surviving on discipline and routine, she had begun to appreciate the stillness. The mission remained unchanged. Find the source. Document everything. Get out alive. The installation sat in the center of a broad depression surrounded by kilometers of dense organic growth. At first glance, it looked natural. Ancient walls disappeared beneath living layers that had grown over them for centuries. But appearances meant nothing. The signal came from there. The signal responsible for the mysterious network behavior. The signal that every Vreth soldier somehow reacted to. Cole spent 4 days observing from concealed positions. No unnecessary movement. No unnecessary risks. The facility was active but lightly guarded. Strange. Anything important enough to broadcast across Vreth space should have been heavily protected. Instead it felt almost sacred. As though protection was unnecessary. As though nobody would ever dare harm it. On the 5th day she found a way inside. The interior immediately challenged everything intelligence had predicted. This was not merely a communications installation. It was something older. Something deeper. The corridors were wide. The proportions deliberate. Every chamber seemed designed not for efficiency but for meaning. Human civilizations had built places like this thousands of years ago. Cathedrals, temples, monuments, structures created to make people feel something. The Vreth had done the same. Symbols covered the walls. Not language. Not exactly. Patterns repeated across ceilings and floors in variations that suggested memory rather than communication. Cole photographed everything. Every surface. Every marking. Every architectural detail. Hours passed. The deeper she moved, the stronger the sensation became. Not fear. Not danger. Presence. The feeling that generations had stood here before her. Watching. Remembering. Eventually she reached the center. The chamber was enormous. A circular room with a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. In the middle stood a single cylindrical structure approximately 2 meters tall. Ancient. Weathered. Still functioning. Every instrument she carried immediately confirmed the same thing. This was the source. The origin point of the signal. The signal that touched every corner of Vreth space. Cole approached carefully. The structure emitted no visible energy. No weapons systems. No defensive mechanisms. Just the signal. Constant. Steady. Endless. She began recording. Measurements. Scans. Photographs. Energy readings. 3 hours passed. Then movement appeared at the edge of the chamber. Cole reacted instantly. 1 second she was standing beside the structure. The next she was concealed behind a support pillar. Invisible. Silent. A Vreth soldier entered through a distant doorway. The soldier walked directly toward the central structure. No hesitation. No caution. As though visiting something familiar, the creature stopped in front of the cylinder and made a sound. Cole froze. She recognized it immediately. The same vocalization recorded at the relay station. The sound Orva's translators had identified as a distress response. But this was different. Completely different. There was no fear here. No panic. The tone carried something else. Something impossible to translate. Something emotional. The soldier remained there for several minutes, standing before the structure, listening, remembering. Then it quietly departed. Cole waited 10 minutes before moving. Her instincts screamed that she had witnessed something important. Not military, not tactical. Something older, something cultural, something personal. She resumed documentation. Hours later she transmitted the data. Back across the stars. Back to Confederation intelligence. Back to Orva. Back to Voss. Neither woman slept that night. Because buried inside Cole's recordings was the answer. The answer to what the signal truly was. And once they understood it, everything about the war would change. Orva called Director Voss at 4:07 in the morning. She did not apologize for the hour. Her voice sounded wrong. Not frightened. Not excited. Stunned. Voss answered immediately. "What is it?" For a moment Orva said nothing. Then she spoke. "We know what the signal is." Voss sat upright. The words instantly erased any trace of fatigue. "Tell me." Another pause. "The structure Cole found is not a military installation." Voss frowned. "Then what is it?" Orva took a breath. "It is a memory." Silence filled the room. Voss waited. "The signal predates Vreth spaceflight by thousands of years," Orva continued. "It is older than their empire, older than their expansion across the stars, older than every war they have ever fought." Voss stared at the data scrolling across her screen. "What does it do?" Orva's answer came quietly. "It reminds them who they are." The room seemed to become smaller. Orva continued. "We translated the symbolic patterns. Not completely, but enough. The signal is not transmitting commands. It is not coordinating fleets. It is not directing soldiers. Then what is it transmitting? The closest human concept would be ancestral home." Voss remained silent. Orva pressed on. "Every Vreth receives it. Constantly. Everywhere in their territory. The signal tells them that they belong to something larger than themselves." She swallowed. "It is identity." The implications struck like a physical blow. For weeks the Confederation had believed the signal was a strategic asset. A military tool. A hidden command network. It wasn't. It was something far more important. It was the thing that connected billions of Vreth into a civilization. The thing that reminded them they were one people. One history. One collective. One story. Voss finally spoke. "If it stopped." Orva hesitated. "We don't know. Estimate. We can't. Try." Orva was quiet for several seconds. Then she answered. "Nothing like this has ever been shut down." The words hung heavily between them. The oldest surviving artifact of an entire civilization. Still broadcasting. Still functioning. Still shaping billions of lives. Voss leaned back. And for the first time since the war began, she found herself thinking not as a strategist, but as a human being. What would happen if someone destroyed humanity's memory? Not its cities, not its armies, its memory, its connection to its past, its sense of belonging, its understanding of where it came from. The thought unsettled her. 36 hours later another transmission arrived. This one came directly from Dara Cole. The mission was complete. Every recording had been transmitted. Every measurement secured. Everything Voss had requested was already safely inside Confederation databases. But there was an additional message attached. Personal note. Voss opened it. The words were brief. Full documentation transmitted. Moving toward extraction. One additional observation. The structure contains a manual shutdown mechanism. I can reach it. Your call. Voss read the message twice. Then a third time. The room was silent. No advisors. No committee. No council vote. The decision belonged entirely to her. Destroying the signal might weaken the Vreth. It might destabilize them. It might even shorten the war. Or it might do something far worse. Something irreversible. She remembered Orva's words. Identity. Ancestral home. The thing that tells them who they are. She imagined billions of beings suddenly losing that connection. And she wondered whether victory achieved that way would still be victory. Hours passed. Finally she typed her response. Only 4 words. Do not touch it. Then another 2. Come home. The transmission crossed the stars. Cole received it inside the ancient structure. She read it once. A faint smile appeared, then disappeared. The mission was over. Almost. What neither woman knew was that the Vreth had already sensed something. For 11 days they had been tracking traces. Tiny disturbances. Minor anomalies. Brief thermal signatures. Fragments of evidence. Nothing conclusive. Nothing they could catch. But enough to know something impossible was happening. Something was inside their territory. Something was moving through places that should have been secure. Something that appeared, vanished, and left no trail behind. More patrols were deployed. More sensors activated. More soldiers assigned to the search. Still they found nothing. Only uncertainty. Only fear. Only the growing realization that an invisible predator might be standing nearby. Watching. Waiting. Learning. For 19 days Cole had lived inside the heart of Vreth space. For 19 days millions of Vreth soldiers searched for her. And for 19 days none of them succeeded. The Vreth had always been the nightmare of the galaxy. The unstoppable force. The hunter. Now, for the first time in their history, they were experiencing something unfamiliar. They were being hunted. And they could not find the hunter. As Cole began her long journey toward extraction, the Vretha's greatest fear followed behind her like a shadow. Not fleets. Not weapons. Not armies. A single human being. Alone in the dark. The 48-hour window ended. Across Vreth space, the 12 compromised relay nodes returned to normal operation. False information stopped flowing. Corrupted data vanished. Fleet networks corrected themselves. The Vreth began recovering. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. Confederation fleets had spent 2 full days exploiting chaos inside the enemy's command structure. Entire offensives had collapsed. Supply chains had failed. Commanders had acted on false intelligence. For the first time in 11 years, the Vreth advance stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. When the final reports arrived, Admiral Vesserin reviewed them alone. 211 Vreth warships destroyed. 4 commander-class vessels eliminated. 37 major installations crippled. 4 previously lost sectors returned to active contest. The numbers were staggering. Yet one figure held her attention longer than all the others. 743. Confederation personnel lost during the operation. She stared at the number for a long time. 743 lives. 743 stories. 743 people who would never come home. Victory could never make that small. She refused to let it. Eventually she continued reading. And stopped again. The human operations teams. 126 deployed. 126 returned. Every single one. Vesserin read the line twice. Then a third time. It made no sense. Operations this deep inside enemy territory should have produced casualties. Significant casualties. Statistics demanded it. When she later asked Director Voss about it, the answer seemed almost absurd. They're trained to come back. Vesserin frowned. That is not an explanation. It is to them. The probability alone. Probability describes populations. Voss interrupted. My people are individuals. Vesserin studied her. The human director looked completely serious. They chose this, Voss continued. They chose the training. They chose the risk. They chose each other. That changes nothing mathematically. Sometimes it does. The answer irritated Vesserin, mostly because she suspected it might be true. Human military culture was unlike anything in the Confederation. Soldiers were not assigned. They volunteered. They selected difficult paths. They endured years of preparation. And most importantly, they formed teams. Not units. Teams. Small groups built around trust so strong that members would risk everything for one another. The concept fascinated her, and frightened her slightly, because she was beginning to understand why the Vreth struggled against them. Months passed, then years. The Vreth adapted, as they always did. They redesigned their communications architecture from the ground up. New encryption, new routing systems, new security protocols. Yet when analysts examined the changes, something unusual appeared. The modifications were not designed to stop fleets. They were not designed to stop weapons. They were designed to stop people, specifically humans. Every new defense focused on detecting infiltrators, finding anomalies, tracking individuals, preventing invisible intrusions. The Vreth were no longer preparing for conventional warfare. They were preparing for humans, for the quiet ones, for the patient ones, for the people who appeared where they should not exist. The Confederation noticed. So did the Vreth, and neither side could ignore what it meant. Within 2 years, the original 200 human specialists had become thousands. New volunteers arrived constantly. Not only humans. Members of other species began training alongside them. Refugees, survivors, soldiers whose worlds had fallen, people with reasons to fight, people who wanted their homes back. The new generation learned the same lessons: patience, precision, adaptability, and above all else, get everyone home. The war continued, but something fundamental had changed. The Vreth still possessed larger fleets, greater numbers, superior industrial capacity. Yet they no longer controlled information. And wars are rarely won by strength alone. They are won by understanding, by knowing what the enemy knows, by shaping what the enemy believes. Over the next 4 years, human teams quietly dismantled the foundations of Vreth power. Supply chains failed at critical moments. Commanders received false intelligence. Entire offensives collapsed before they began. Decisions made perfect sense to the Vreth leaders making them. And that was the problem. Because the information behind those decisions had already been altered. The enemy was inside. Always inside. Watching. Waiting. Adjusting. The Vreth eventually developed a phrase that appeared repeatedly in intercepted communications. A phrase used with equal parts fear and frustration. A phrase that became common throughout their military. The translation was imperfect, but the closest human equivalent was simple. The ones who are already here. Not coming. Not approaching. Already here. Inside the system. Inside the network. Inside the plan. Inside the blind spots nobody else could see. By the 4th year, the Vreth offensive capability had largely collapsed. Not through one decisive battle. Not through overwhelming force. But through thousands of small precise actions accumulated over time. Commander misled. A shipment delayed. A sensor disabled. A message altered. A single decision nudged slightly off course. Enough to matter. Never enough to notice immediately. The war ended the same way it had been fought. Quietly. Patiently. One day the final Vreth fleet simply stopped advancing. Then another. Then another. The galaxy held its breath. And for the first time in 15 years, the front lines did not move. The conflict was over. Master Sergeant Dara Cole was 42 years old when the final confirmation arrived. She was sitting in a planning room, not celebrating, not giving speeches, working. When the message appeared, she simply stared at it. For a long time, 4 years and 7 months of her life had been spent inside enemy territory. 219 operations. Hundreds of people trained. Thousands deployed. The war had consumed a significant portion of her existence. And now it was finished. The feeling surprised her. It was not triumph. It was not joy. It was relief. The deep, quiet relief that comes when a burden carried for years is finally set down. She thought about the ancient structure, the ancestral signal, the Vreth soldier standing before it, the strange sound it had made. Then she returned to her work, because there would always be something that needed doing. Years later, Admiral Veserin's final report became required reading throughout the Confederation. Military academies studied it. Historians quoted it. Strategists analyzed every chapter. But one paragraph became famous. We invited humans into this war because we had nothing left to lose. We expected ships, weapons, soldiers. What we received was something else entirely. They reminded us that no fortress is perfect, no enemy is untouchable, and no victory is impossible when patient people are willing to spend years preparing for a single moment. We called them special forces. The Vreth called them many things, but the phrase that appeared most often in enemy communications translated as, the ones who are already here. I believe that description was accurate. They were already here, in the dark, in the silence, watching, learning, waiting, and I am profoundly grateful they were on our side.